when a look becomes a weapon. This black and white photograph captures Bruce Lee in a moment of raw, undiluted intensity. His shirtless form fills the frame with an energy that seems barely contained. The nunchaku held loosely, yet purposefully, in his right hand. But it's his eyes that command attention, piercing, focused, with a depth that transcends the photograph itself. Behind him, slightly out of focus, another figure watches, bearing witness to what appears to be a training session or film rehearsal. The traditional dojo setting, with its distinctive Asian architectural elements visible in the background, frames this moment in a space where ancient wisdom meets modern cinema. This is not just a photograph of a martial artist preparing for action. It's a window into the mind of a man who transformed himself into a living philosophy, the art of the penetrating gaze. Bruce Lee understood something that many martial artists never grasp. Combat begins long before the first strike. In this photograph, his gaze demonstrates what he called the eyes of intention. Lee believed that your eyes revealed your strategy, your confidence, and your spirit. He trained himself to maintain what he described as soft eyes, relaxed yet completely aware, seeing everything without fixating on anything. This photographic moment captures that principle perfectly. His expression isn't aggressive or theatrical, it's the face of absolute presence. Lee once said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." This photograph embodies that sentiment, the look of someone who has transcended mere technique to reach a state of complete mental and physical integration. The nunchaku, from farming tool to cinematic icon. The nunchaku dangling from Lee's hand tells a story that spans centuries and continents. Originally developed in Okinawa, possibly from a horse bridle or a farming tool used to thresh grain, the nunchaku was adopted by martial artists as an effective close-quarters weapon. Two wooden or metal sticks connected by a short chain or rope, the weapon requires exceptional hand-eye coordination and generates tremendous striking force through rotational momentum. Bruce Lee's relationship with the nunchaku began during his Wing Chun training under Yip Man in Hong Kong, though he significantly refined and modernized the techniques. This photograph likely dates from the early 1970s, during his Golden Harvest film era. Lee's casual grip on the weapon in this image is deceptive. From this relaxed position, he could execute devastating strikes in fractions of a second. His training regimen included practicing nunchaku techniques for hours daily, working on figure-8 patterns, strikes, blocks, and the fluid transitions between them. Anatomy of a fighter, the science behind the physique. Bruce Lee's physical form in this photograph represents what exercise physiologists would later recognize as the ideal athletic build: lean, defined, and explosively powerful. At approximately 135 pounds on a 5'7" frame, Lee defied conventional wisdom about size and strength. His body fat percentage hovered between 3 to 5%, a level most athletes can only achieve temporarily before competition. But this wasn't about aesthetics for Lee. It was about function. Every visible muscle in this photograph served a specific purpose in his martial arts system. His shoulders, clearly defined here, were developed through thousands of repetitions of punching drills, and his innovative training with cables and weights. His core, visible even in this side angle, was legendary, capable of generating the explosive power that made his strikes so devastating despite his relatively light weight. Lee's training philosophy was decades ahead of its time, incorporating elements of what we now call circuit training, plyometrics, and periodization. The witness, training in the company of others. The figure visible behind Bruce Lee in this photograph adds a fascinating dimension to the image. This appears to be a training partner or student, watching Lee demonstrate technique or prepare for a take. Throughout his career, Lee emphasized the importance of learning through observation and sparring with partners. Unlike many traditional martial arts masters who kept their techniques secret, Lee believed in open exchange of knowledge. He trained with practitioners from various disciplines: karate, judo, boxing, fencing, incorporating anything that proved effective while discarding what didn't work. This collaborative approach was revolutionary in the 1960s and early 1970s, when martial arts schools were often insular and protective of their methods. The presence of this observer in the photograph reminds us that martial arts mastery isn't achieved in isolation. Even at his peak, Lee continued to learn, test, and refine his understanding through interaction with others. The dojo as sacred space. The setting of this photograph, what appears to be a traditional training hall or film set designed to resemble one, carries deep significance. The architectural elements visible in the background, with their clean lines and geometric patterns, reflect the aesthetic principles of classical Asian design. These spaces were designed to facilitate focus and discipline, stripping away distractions to create an environment where mind and body could unite in practice. By the early 1970s, when this photo was likely taken, Bruce Lee had already established himself as a global phenomenon. Yet he maintained a deep respect for the traditional training environments where martial arts had been refined over centuries. The dojo represented more than just a practice space. It was a place where the ordinary rules of everyday life were suspended, where hierarchy was based on skill and dedication rather than wealth or status, and where the pursuit of excellence was the only currency that mattered. Jeet Kune Do in action, the philosophy made flesh. This photograph embodies the core principles of Jeet Kune Do, the martial arts philosophy Bruce Lee developed. The name translates as way of the intercepting fist, but the system encompasses far more than fighting techniques. Lee created GKD in response to what he saw as the limitations of traditional martial arts: rigid forms, impractical techniques, and an overemphasis on style over substance. His famous water metaphor perfectly captures the GKD mindset. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. If you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, and it becomes the bottle. In this photograph, we see that philosophy in Lee's relaxed yet ready posture. There's no tension, no wasted energy, but also no doubt about the explosive potential waiting to be unleashed. GKD emphasized simplicity, directness, and personal expression. Lee believed that every fighter must discover their own path, using what works for their unique physical attributes and circumstances while discarding what doesn't serve them. The mental game, meditation and visualization. Bruce Lee's calm, focused expression in this photograph reflects his serious commitment to mental training. Long before sports psychology became mainstream, Lee understood that mental preparation was as important as physical conditioning. He meditated daily, often for 30 minutes or more, using techniques drawn from his study of Buddhism, Taoism, and Western philosophy. During these sessions, he would visualize fights, running through scenarios and responses in his mind, with such vividness that his nervous system and muscles would actually respond as if executing the movements. Lee kept extensive journals documenting his thoughts on combat, philosophy, and self-improvement. He read voraciously, everything from ancient Eastern philosophical texts to contemporary works on psychology, kinesiology, and biomechanics. This intellectual curiosity informed every aspect of his martial arts practice. The focused look captured in this photograph isn't just concentration, it's the visible manifestation of a mind that has trained itself to achieve what psychologists now call flow state, complete absorption in the present moment, the revolution that changed Hollywood. This photograph represents more than just a martial artist at work, it documents a cultural revolution. When Bruce Lee burst onto the international film scene with The Big Boss in 1971, followed by Fist of Fury in 1972, and Way of the Dragon in 1972, he shattered every Hollywood convention about Asian actors. Previously, Asian men in Western cinema were typically portrayed as villains, servants, or comic relief, never as romantic leads or action heroes. Lee refused these limitations, creating his own opportunities and demonstrating that audiences worldwide would embrace an Asian male lead who was strong, charismatic, and heroic. His impact extended far beyond entertainment. During an era when the Vietnam War had inflamed anti-Asian sentiment in America, and when Asian immigrants faced systematic discrimination, Lee became a symbol of pride and possibility. He proved that talent, dedication, and charisma transcended racial boundaries. Training methodology, the Bruce Lee system. The physical condition captured in this photograph was the result of perhaps the most innovative training program in martial arts history. Bruce Lee approached his body like a scientist conducting an experiment. His daily routine was grueling and comprehensive. Mornings often began with a run, typically 3 to 5 miles. He incorporated interval training before it became popular in mainstream fitness, alternating between different speeds to build both aerobic capacity and anaerobic power. His strength training was equally revolutionary. While traditional martial artists of the 1960s avoided weightlifting, believing it would make them slow and muscle-bound, Lee studied bodybuilding and adapted its principles for functional strength. He focused on compound movements, squats, deadlifts, clean and press, that built power throughout the entire kinetic chain. His abdominal training was legendary, involving hundreds of reps daily of various exercises including leg raises, sit-ups with weight, and the side bends that developed his distinctively small waist. The Nunchaku technique, breaking down the movements. Look closely at how Bruce Lee holds the nunchaku in this photograph. The casual grip with the weapon hanging loosely represents what martial artists call the ready position. From here, Lee could transition instantly into any number of attack or defense patterns. The basic nunchaku technique involves 3 fundamental movements: strikes, blocks, and transitions. Strikes can be delivered horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, with the weapon accelerated through rotation around various pivot points, the wrist, elbow, or shoulder. Blocking with nunchaku requires precise timing, using one stick to deflect an incoming attack while positioning the other stick for a counterstrike. The transitions, the flowing movements between techniques, are what separate masters from amateurs. Lee's nunchaku speed was extraordinary. Film analysis of his movie scenes shows him executing complete rotations of the weapon in less than a tenth of a second. At this speed, the nunchaku becomes nearly invisible to the naked eye, appearing as a blur on film even when shot at standard 24 frames per second. The film industry context. Behind the scenes. This photograph offers a glimpse into the working conditions of Hong Kong cinema in the early 1970s. The Golden Harvest studio system, where Lee made his most famous films, was known for its demanding production schedules and modest budgets compared to Hollywood. Films were often shot in a matter of weeks rather than months, with actors performing their own stunts and fight choreography evolving organically during filming rather than being meticulously planned in advance. Lee thrived in this environment because it gave him creative control. Unlike Hollywood, where he had been relegated to supporting roles or had his ideas dismissed, Hong Kong studios recognized his genius and gave him unprecedented authority over fight choreography, editing, and even directing. The dojo setting visible in this photograph was likely a standing set at Golden Harvest, reused across multiple productions. The simplicity of the space reflects both budget constraints and aesthetic choices. Lee preferred clean, uncluttered backgrounds that kept audience attention focused on the martial arts action. Physical mechanics, the biomechanics of power. Bruce Lee's stance in this photograph, seemingly casual, actually represents optimal biomechanical positioning for explosive movement. His weight appears evenly distributed, his center of gravity low and stable. His shoulders are relaxed, but his core is engaged. You can see the subtle tension in his abdominal muscles even in this side angle. This positioning allows for what Lee called economy of motion. Every movement begins from a neutral, balanced position, eliminating wasted preliminary movements that telegraph intention to an opponent. Lee studied kinesiology extensively, understanding concepts like kinetic linking, the way power generated by the legs transfers through the hips, torso, and shoulders, to ultimately express itself in a punch or strike. His famous 1-inch punch, which could send a man flying backward despite minimal wind-up, demonstrated these principles perfectly. The power came not from arm strength but from the coordinated contraction of muscles throughout his entire body, timed perfectly to deliver maximum force at the moment of impact. The legacy captured in a single frame. 50 years after this photograph was taken, Bruce Lee remains one of the most recognizable figures in global popular culture. His image appears on everything from posters to t-shirts to murals in cities around the world. But this enduring fame rests on something deeper than cinematic achievements or martial arts skill. Lee represented the possibility of transcendence, the idea that through dedication, innovation, and refusal to accept limitations, an individual could remake themselves, and in doing so change the world around them. This photograph captures that transformative quality. It's not just showing us a man holding a weapon, it's showing us someone who has achieved a level of mastery that most people never imagined possible. The calm confidence in his expression, the relaxed power in his physique, the purposeful presence he radiates. These elements combine to create an image of human potential realized, the philosophy of no limitation. Bruce Lee's most profound teaching wasn't a fighting technique but a way of approaching life. He rejected the artificial boundaries that society, culture, and even martial arts traditions imposed on individuals. His famous quote, "I am not teaching you anything, I just help you to explore yourself," encapsulates this philosophy. Lee believed that every person contained vast, largely untapped potential, physical, mental, and spiritual. The barriers to accessing this potential were primarily psychological: fear, self-doubt, rigid thinking, and acceptance of others' definitions of what was possible. This photograph embodies that limitless mindset. Here stands a man who was told repeatedly that he couldn't succeed, that he was too small, too Asian, too unconventional, too different. He responded by becoming one of the most influential figures of the 20th century, revolutionizing not just martial arts and cinema, but inspiring millions to push beyond their self-imposed limitations. Final reflections, the eternal moment. This black and white photograph has transcended its original purpose, whatever that may have been: publicity shot, behind-the-scenes documentation, training record, to become an iconic image. It captures Bruce Lee at the height of his powers, probably in 1972 or early 1973, just months before his shocking death at age 32. There's something haunting about that knowledge when viewing this image. Here is a man in his absolute prime, vibrant with life and energy, unaware that his time is nearly over. Yet perhaps that's what makes the photograph so powerful. Lee lived with complete intensity, wringing every drop of potential from every moment. He didn't live a long life, but he lived a full one, accomplishing more in 32 years than most people achieve in twice that span. The nunchaku in his hand, the focus in his eyes, the confidence in his bearing, these elements combine to remind us that mastery isn't about perfection or completion.
It's about the journey, the constant striving to become better, to understand more deeply, to push the boundaries of what's possible. Bruce Lee's legacy isn't just his films or his martial arts innovations. It's the inspiration he provides to anyone who refuses to accept limitations, who believes that with enough dedication and creativity, we can transcend the ordinary and touch the extraordinary.